Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to welcome you to the Supply Chain Transparency and Environmental, Social and Governance webinar that is organized and provided by SpaceHub's project. So today I would like to introduce you to the agenda and what we will hear today. So first of all, I will briefly tell you more about the SpaceHub's project and who's actually behind the webinar, what activities we implement and what we could offer to startups that actually work in space industry. Then I will give the floor to our consortium partner, to our project partner, Simon from AXSYSNAV, who will be talking about space for environmental, social and governance. And then we will also have a guest today, Christopher Edwards from Xylene, who will also talk about supply chain transparency. And at the end of the webinar, we will also have a Q&A session where everyone will be available to answer your questions that you may have after the presentations. So as I mentioned, I would like to tell you a bit more about SpaceHub's project. So hopefully you should have seen our website and read all about our exciting activities. But just to summarize, we are 7 consortium partners from different European countries. We will be implementing the project for 2 years. The overall objective of SUN is to actually increase the commercialization of space-enabled solutions and grow European startups and scale-ups in the space industry. So among our other objectives are actually filling the gaps between the existing initiatives, because what we actually recognize is that the support is there, but what we want to do as well is bridge the gaps between those initiatives that already provide the support and help startups to go from one program and then reach the level that is required to participate in a similar program, for example. We will also ensure that continuous individual support is provided during our individual mentorship programs that I will also talk about in a second. And we also raise awareness on the available tools to enhance financial sustainability, viability of the businesses and other important topics within the space sector, hence the webinar today to discuss quite an important subject in space industry as well. Just an overall picture of what the project activities are. So as I have mentioned, we recognize that there are already some initiatives that provide great support to space startups in terms of generation of ideas, incubating them, incorporation, and actually helping to establish a startup and then attract the initial finance, generate sales revenues, and onboard clients. But what we do in between those activities, we also encourage creation of new startups by organizing hackathons and helping people to develop their ideas and actually apply space technology to actually commercialize those ideas. And as I mentioned as well, we will also be implementing the one-to-one mentorship program that is actually focused on either establishing a startup or actually scaling it up, attracting finances and generating revenue. So 5 main activities to actually deal with multi-level challenges that we think that startups in space industry face is promotion of space downstream applications, and then 3 level programs that are pre-incubation support, pre-acceleration support, and post-acceleration support to actually help startups, SMEs, or entrepreneurs to move between the stages and to receive the necessary support that is based on their individual needs. And we will also match startups with existing initiatives, such as other acceleration programs or other like incubation programs, such as ESA incubator centers and so on. Briefly, to introduce you 3 different levels of programs for the mentorship that we will be providing since September. Are 3 levels: pre-incubation, pre-acceleration, and post-acceleration. So the main idea of the pre-incubation program is to actually focus on prototyping the minimal viable product, validating it, and finding the market fit, as well as validating the revenue model. So in total, 40 entrepreneurs and startups will be selected, and 12 hours of individually tailored consultations will be provided to them. The RAS pre-acceleration program will focus more on actually prototyping the high fidelity MVP and then validating the value delivery. We will have also 30 entrepreneurs and startups selected, and they will receive 24 hours of individual consultations, also planned to start in September. And also our post-acceleration program is for those startups that are planning to scale up and attract the initial investment to onboard significant clients. We will have in total of 10 teams, 10 startups or scale-ups selected to participate, and also 24 hours of individual consultations will be provided. Just a side note that what we encourage is that our participants can actually participate in all 3 levels of the program, of course not simultaneously, but if you are at the pre-incubation level now and apply to our program, then we will have a second call as well to participate, and then you can still apply to our programs to receive even more support from us. And the deadline is actually approaching, so it is the 15th of June, if I am correct. It should be next Wednesday. So don't don't hesitate to contact us in case you have any questions, and if you need help identifying which program is suitable for you, or if you want to find out more, we can jump on a call and talk about your needs as well. But the form as well for the open call is straightforward, so I will encourage everyone to go on our website, which is spacehubs.network, and actually apply before the 15th of June so you can benefit from our support program. So that's it from me. Actually, if you would like to have a chat, we can connect on LinkedIn, or you can drop me an email. You can also find my contacts and other partners' contacts on our website, which is, as I mentioned, spacehubs.network. So feel free to reach out, and I will be more than happy to help you to assist in identifying which program is suitable for you. But let's move on now to actual presentation for today. So I'll give the word now to Simon, who will be presenting the supply chain transparency topic today. So welcome, Simon.
Thank you, Goda. Thank you very much. So hi to everybody. Nice to have you here on the second webinar of the Sun project. I'd like to talk to you about what space can do, the space business, what can be done for ESG. So this is the criteria that investors use that looks at the environmental, social, and governance of companies, and to assess the viability and the long-term durability of companies. So just a quick explanation of ESG. It's been very popular over the past couple of years. And so, for example, last year we have BlackRock, which is one of the largest asset management companies in the world, saying it would use ESG for all of its investment decisions going forward. So that's one of the top 3 asset management companies in the world will be using ESG going forward. And as it says here on the slide, sustainable investment is increasing very strongly, 25 trillion euros last year, up 70%, and 10 times the figure of 2004. So why would space companies be interested in ESG? And the answer is that it's part of long-term viability of a company. What this means is companies that have little kudos or little respect for environmental criteria, particularly, but also social and governance, will find it increasingly difficult to gain investment, venture capital investment in the coming period, since it's now seen by consumers, investors, as an important part of the business. Businesses should be environmentally sound. We hear a lot about net zero carbon. That's what people are trying for. So these kind of criteria are looked at very closely when a company is going for fundraising. Indeed, when you have a good ECG filing, when you've created your company's ECG dossier, then you have quite often a much better credit rating with the agencies, and because of reduced financial risk. That means, for example, if you're aware of the environmental impact of your business, then you can offset and manage that as a future risk. And obviously, the last point there, we know that climate crisis negatively affects the operations of a company, with the physical risks also to people, and the production risks. So we'll talk about production risks later with Chris when he talks about supply chain and supply chain transparency. So the first pillar of ESG, the environmental, that's the one that everybody knows about. The carbon footprint of the company is considered in terms of the emissions. So the waste gas produced by transport and the CO2 chemicals produced by oil and gas industry, waste products, so leather tanning, the waste products, heavy metals, mercury going into rivers in India. Many examples of the waste and harmful emissions made by the industry. So these are things looked at when companies are being evaluated. Obviously, the energy industry has a very keen interest in having a good ESG dossier in order to reduce the impact on the environment. And the second aspect, social criteria. What this means is the way that the company manages the relationship with its own workforce. So how does a company look after and provide training and provide a good level of education for its employees, but not only the employees, but also the local population. So large employers have significant impact on the local areas and regions, countries. We see that also in India, in China, that the social aspect of employment is quite controversial, with companies like Foxconn having child labor and companies in China using the Uyghur population. So these are social impact elements that are taken into account in ESG evaluations. So this is all creating negative or positive criteria for your company. And so governance, so the way that the company manages the self-governance of the company, and the procedures and practices it uses for compliance. So compliance, is often talked about in the financial sector. So compliance means how is the company respecting the regulation. So financial markets are regulated quite heavily. The Securities and Exchange Commission in the US, for example. And so these governance procedures are written down, declared, described, and the company in its filing of ESG needs to state how it's using and complying with those requirements. And the guidelines are also useful to help reduce the number of corporate scandals. Okay. And a thing then in the news this week, if you look at the meeting of the G7 in the UK this morning, discussion about tax avoidance and the proposals to have a 50% global tax rate in order to reduce the amount of tax that's not being paid into Western economies. Right, so those are the basic principles of ESG in the corporate world, what it means, why it's important. What I'd like to do now is talk about space, because I know that's of interest to a lot of you here, the space industry. So there are many things that the space industry can do in its business model, to help companies with ESG. So you have the corporate world, financial world, and they can take benefit from space companies products in order to ensure they have good ESG criteria in their management. So the environment is the biggest winner for the space industry, as you can imagine. Geospatial data, Earth observation data. So what that means is taking raw data, radar images, optical images, multispectral data, and making it geospatial, which means referencing it to particular areas of the planet, geospatial. And you can then, as you have a reference for that data, you can add layers of information and to have higher and higher added value services. So companies like Planet have very good business models, taking raw data and analyzing raw data and using it to apply it to real world situations. For example, in insurance, oil and gas, so to do with the impact of the oil and gas industry on the local environment. And solar array predictions, what does that mean? That means owners and operators of these farms of solar arrays, solar panels, will use predictions from observations of weather data, cloud cover, basically, to manage their production of electricity. Solar has a particular problem in the energy market because you need batteries to stock the energy, or if you don't have the batteries, then you have to produce in real time the kilowatts, the megawatts. And one of the main problems solar farms have is to meet demand, because there's no way of gathering the energy and stocking it up. So the Earth observation space products can be used to predict the amount of solar exposure on these solar farms. And okay, the second point is the regulation. So there's quite strong regulation now in terms of forest exploitation, renewing of forest, and to make sure that sustainable resources are being used. So the space industry can provide proof of compliance with those regulations. Quite a few startups came out of the Copernicus accelerator that are dealing with that. We'll see later on with the Xylene that they also went through the Copernicus accelerator. So Chris will talk more about that. And the last point with coastlines, using space data to see how the world is changing around us. Many of the large investment decisions about whether we should, for example, set up a business in a particular location in the world, and now part of the dossier is the impact of climate change over the next 20 years. So the impact of the climate change will affect the way that the business decides to set up. Where will it set up? In an area that's in the risk of physical change through climate change, or in a more stable area. So those kind of factors are part of ESG at the moment. Supply chain, so farm to fork. Recycling is a good example of you need to put your money where your mouth is. So recycling is quite often disappointing if you look at the way the products that are recycled by households, they actually get back into the production chain, and the answer is no, they're quite often burnt or in landfill. So these are things that space can do, is to check with the compliance of these regulations. So a couple more examples. Air pollution. So air transport is creating carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide. So the gases that get trapped in the atmosphere and cause an increase in temperature, heating of the Earth's atmosphere, the surface of the Earth. But also methane and other harmful aerosols are emitted. And satellites can detect the emission of these harmful gases. There's a startup with a little project for nanosatellites, and they'll be just looking at methane emissions around the world as they locally occur. So again, startup companies in space find out a particular need in terms of environmental monitoring, in this case, methane gas, and they'll get financing to launch a few satellites and to check the evolution of that polluting element. That's quite an important part of the environment. And again, greenhouse gases. So that's key. Water management. Okay, so management of fresh water at a global level is a real problem, with many areas of the world, many regions coming under pressure. India, Bangladesh, to have a lack of fresh water. Industries, chemical, nuclear, steel and construction, and also agriculture have huge requirements on water management. So we've seen in Australia, the huge dairy farms producing the milk, just draining the water from the water table in those countries. And what the space industry can do is to, if you look at the level of the Earth, of the ground, you can see the ground is subsiding in areas where water is being extracted. So in Australia, again, where the water is being taken out to be used by cattle or cereals, you'll see the land is reducing in height, subsiding, and you can identify that from space. You can use a radar altimetry to observe a few millimeters of movement of the surface of the surface of the Earth. Okay, another point is transport. So the public funding from the European Union over the past 20 years into Galileo and into Earth observation as being used in the transport sector, particularly for route optimization. So this means that reduced consumption of fuels, reduced consumption of diesel through optimizing routes for transport sector can reduce the impact and reduce greenhouse gases. And again, the point there about interferometry, which is radar for millimeter level changes on the Earth's surface. So all of these sensors that are flying on the satellites can be used to create raw data that startup companies, space startups, can use and exploit in their business. What can space do for social and governance? So social inclusion, which means telecom links. So during the pandemic, we saw encouraging signs from a number of people who have physical handicaps, who are basically often confined to their homes and cannot be as mobile as they would like. They were able to get real work and get employment through the use of telecoms links and improved links, 4G, 5G, and satellite links. So all of these telecoms links are creating opportunities through infrastructure for people to take advantage of the space technology. Thank you very much. So that was a quick run through ESG, and so I hope you've been able to see that ESG criteria are really extremely important today for investment, for fundraising on one point, and secondly, ESG also can benefit from space companies, from space data, and from the added value of space applications. Okay, so I'll hand the floor back over. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon, for such a great presentation. And if anyone has any questions, I will encourage everyone to put it in the chat, and then we have a Q&A session after the next presentation. And now I would like to welcome Christopher Edwards from Xylene, who will talk more about the supply chain transparency. So thank you very much, Christopher, for joining us, and the floor at the virtual stage is yours. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. It's my pleasure to present to you today Xylene, our startup. My name is Christopher Edwards. I'm one of the founders and managing directors of Xylene, and it's a pleasure today to present Xylene, but also I'm really happy to receive all your questions, and I'm very happy if there are further questions to book a demonstration, schedule a demonstration call later on in the aftermath. Xylene itself is a space tech company, and we found a great application for satellite data and blockchain that helps companies in the raw material sector, producers and importers, to build a more transparent, trustworthy supply chain. First of all, let me introduce you to the team. So I'm not doing this by myself. My co-founder, Giuseppe Beninati, is an engineer and leads our product development, while on my side, with my background in supply chain management and business, I focus mainly on the business development activities within Xylene. And because of our connection to satellite data for traceability, we are supported by the European Space Agency, and I'm very proud that we were selected last year by ESA to be one of their top 10 startups. On top of that, we were the winners of the Galileo Masters in 2019 for the connection of satellite data for the purpose of raw material traceability. But why is this all important? Now, a lot of companies are asking themselves the question, what's happening in my supply chain? And this is a very valid question, because around 70% of them have no clue what is going on. A lot of companies are struggling with the complexity in supply chains, and this is a major hindrance for supply chain visibility and transparency within the supply chain. And a lot of this is fueled by all of us as consumers. Consumers are raising their awareness, raising their awareness towards more responsible and sustainably sourced materials and products. And the purchasing preferences are clearly moving towards more inclusiveness and environmental impact. And interestingly enough, it's also the case that on a regulatory side, governments and regulators are introducing new rules and regulations that force companies to take more responsibility for what is happening in their supply chain. Now, what I'm showing you here is a mapping of the global regulatory landscape for more transparency and responsibility within international supply chains. And obviously, Europe being one of the leaders in the sense of promoting sustainability has put a lot of regulatory approaches forward. Most recently, the conflict minerals regulation that started this year, but also other countries within the global landscape have introduced measures and regulations that force companies to just take more responsibility in America, in Mexico, in Australia, and also individual countries, member states of the European Union are introducing national rules that govern how companies have to report their activities when it comes to sustainable impact, ethical work practices of their international supply chains. And a lot of these are hotly debated, including the one in the Netherlands, Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. What is really driving these companies is the problem that they don't really know what is happening in their supply chain. And this is where Xylene comes in. We are a solution that helps companies to reinvent their products and give them a sustainable and digital life. And for this, we bring together the three major pillars within the supply chain, which are people, products, and industry, to help these companies build transparency and traceability within their operations, but also use sustainability as an added value for their products and a competitive advantage on the market. And this moves them towards a more circular approach of how to view their products, but also how to place their products on the market. We have developed for this a smart data gathering solution that is combined with efficient management, which allows us to provide to our customers the web dashboard to allow them to manage information, make decisions based on traceability information, and connect this to different stakeholders. While on the other hand, their suppliers engage with our mobile application to gather information in the field on the products and on the processing steps and create digital twins of these. And we've designed this in a very easy to implement fashion that allows them to create accessible transparency, as mentioned, for internal decision making, but also for the connection with market stakeholders. And these include auditors and regulators to promote easy compliance activities and ensure the sustainability claims that are being connected to the product are being met. And this can only be assured by having accurate and secure data that allows us also to include further analysis such as carbon footprint traceability. So who does Xylene really connect in the system? Our customers, being importers and producers in our system, connect with their suppliers to map out the entire supply chain, but also include service providers such as logistics companies to our platform to manage and steer the information and the product flows that are taking place in the supply chain. And also we enable auditors to connect to our system in order to prove sustainability claims and work towards an easy way of complying with the regulations. And within a sharing platform, it is always a critical task to manage confidentiality. For this purpose, Xylene has developed the 3P design that allows us to manage confidentiality in a 3-step level, declaring information amongst entities as being public, private, protected. And this helps us to manage the visibility and to serve confidentiality and stakeholder engagement at the same time. Xylene is an easy to implement solution. In 3 steps, we start by onboarding suppliers of our customers, the producers, and create a visualization of the entire network. This is the first step for being certain of what is happening in the supply chain and who am I really working with. Based on this, the second step is then engaging with product flow traceability. And this is where suppliers use our app to trace and verify all the products and shipments that they are manufacturing and sending over to the next suppliers. And finally, once the journey of all the product flows has been collected and traced through the system, this information can be used to communicate sustainability claims and show the journey of the product in detail. But Xylene doesn't only trace any sort of information. What we do is we use satellite data and blockchain to help build an authentic record of the chain of custody. And this happens in the way that suppliers, when collecting information on the product, such as unit information on volumes, weights of the product, but also images for quality purposes, and very importantly, documentation for the shipment of products. All of these informations, when they are collected, satellite data helps us to geo-reference and timestamp each of these transactions and map them out over Earth observation images coming from Copernicus. That builds enhanced confidence in the data and helps us verify that this information is authentic and trustworthy. And at this point, we store the information on a blockchain, on a distributed ledger, that helps us to ensure that along the supply chain, no one has changed the information and the information is trustworthy until it reaches our customers. And finally, this allows us to have a system with verified and secured data of the authentic record of the chain of custody. Now, Xylene is a startup, and we have developed our system to include the proof of origin and sustainability activities of early adopting customers. And we've developed such as an early adopter program that allows our initial customers to start defining in a 5-step approach and tracing the overall supply chain that they are working with. So in the first step, we define the entire supply chain that we want to focus on, and on board in the second step all the relevant entities that start tracking in the third step all the product flows throughout the supply chain. Finally, in the fourth step, we can use this to engage and comply with the rules and regulations and engage with the consumers in this step. At the last step, we identify and measure and maximize the benefits that traceability can have for these supply chains when it comes especially to regulatory measures, but also to sustainability approaches. This is a key factor for improving the competitive approach for companies. We do this on a 6 to 9 month period of time and with very customized support. And to show you some of the examples that we have, I have prepared 2 case studies for you. One on Ethiopian wild coffee, where we've traced the journey of from the Ethiopian highlands to the German producer, and finally having a QR code on the product that allows consumers to engage with the journey of the product and also the producers. And on the second, a Sicilian olive oil, where we've proved the origin and the authenticity of this product to consumers. So this is a short presentation on Xylene. It was a pleasure to present our startup to you. If you have any further questions or want to dig deeper into this, please reach out to us. We're happy to schedule a demonstration with you. And I'm now happy to receive your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Christopher, for your presentation. Thanks a lot for joining Sun's webinar today. So yeah, I will encourage everyone to ask questions in the Q&A that should be available on your screen. I can already see that there are 2 questions actually regarding the program. So just to clarify, Sun actually is supporting all business ideas and like upstream and downstream solutions as well. It's basically providing the support at 3 different levels, but as long as your solution is space related, then we do support and provide the mentorship program for those companies. So that's just basically to answer the question about the criteria to participate in the program. Simon, perhaps you have anything to add?
Yeah, no, that's a good explanation. Yeah, we're looking for people with entrepreneurs with ideas in the early cycle, but also as companies start up and exist, we're also looking for companies seeking funding, for example. So it's the whole cycle.
Okay, thank you. I can't see any more questions, but we still have time if you want to ask anything to either clarify some things about the program, or if you have any questions for Simon and Christopher, then everything's welcome.
I think we had a question earlier, didn't we have a question earlier about a smart city IoT solution? I think we had somebody asking a question. Somebody wants to put into space some microsatellites working on IoT. Very good idea. And the market for IoT is slowly evolving and slowly taking off. So there's quite high risk at the moment, IoT in space, because the ground coverage is so good. So it's a risky venture. If that person, if they can type in something into the Q&A, I can provide a bit more. There was, I got a question here from LK asking about upstream. Yeah, I agree. Upstream, downstream. Downstream, I talked about downstream a lot because it's quite dominant. It's relatively simple to get hold of free data and produce a mobile app to reach a need. So the barriers to entry downstream data applications are quite low. Upstream is a different story. If you're talking about technology that's flying on satellites, then for sure, it's a different ballgame. The barriers for entry are higher. But there are needs within the space infrastructure, within the upstream market, particularly in terms of sensors. So I'm thinking about cameras that could fly on nanosatellites or different types of sensing devices. They all have a market to develop, and they can check, as I talked about earlier, gas emissions on the ground using their different sensors. So upstream is also a definite possibility. New technology means that the sensors we're talking about, the cameras or the devices, are much lighter, much cheaper to put into place. If you look at the business model, don't forget launching is still a bit of a pain. The cost of launching satellites is maybe 30% of the mission, and that cost is incompressible. So currently, the launching part of the business model is difficult to take into account. We have startups coming up now that will be within the next maybe 5 to 10 years proposing very cheap launching methods using 3D printing of launchers. So I'm thinking about Rocket Labs and companies like that. There's companies in Europe as well that are working on similar cheap launching, Pangaea Aerospace. So that could be coming along in 5 to 10 years. So Goda, do we have any more questions?
Yes, thank you, Simon. We do actually have a question to Christopher. So where is your solution already in operation, and which blockchain do you use?
Yes, thank you very much. So we've been operational in many fields. We don't focus on a specific industry. As mentioned, the 2 case studies, one of these in the coffee industry where we've been working intensively, but also we are working in the field of batteries. So minerals traceability is a very big factor for us, especially because the European Union is building up a lot of battery production capacity. This is an important aspect of our traceability approach to allow minerals to come from ethical production sites and sustainable production sites. And when it comes to the blockchain, we are essentially blockchain agnostic. Our first approach, our standard approach basically is to work with the IBM Hyperledger, which is the approach that allows us to perform our activities in let's say for a supply chain activity, the easiest way to get started. But as mentioned, we are blockchain agnostic, and we can implement different approaches depending on the customer requirements.
Okay, thank you, Christopher. I don't think there are any other questions. Maybe somebody wants to add something to the Q&A, then feel free to ask your question to any of us. Okay, I can see there are no more questions. Oh, there is one. To Christopher, so how crowded is the space for using Earth observation for ESG? Who are your competitors?
So, for a matter of fact, Earth observation is a new technology when it comes to implementing traceability and the verification of traceability. For us, it was in the beginning an exploratory approach to see what benefits could arise from that, but we quickly noticed that by combining different aspects of technology, we were reaching a very high level of confidence in the information that we can share with our customers. Interestingly enough, when it comes to the space of traceability, it's a very fragmented space. It's a very new market. The legislations that are in place are very, very new. So it's not something we can build on a history of many companies that have performed traceability in the past. So with this very fragmented market, we can see that a lot of different approaches are being selected from companies, from startups, to provide traceability. And for us, our approach is really a new way of looking at traceability as a whole, and also a new way of connecting individual players within the supply chain together. And the most important thing when it comes to traceability is ensuring what data is coming in and being sure that it's authentic and trustworthy. And for that purpose, satellite data is really something that allows us to use a source of information that is trustworthy and use this for the validation of the information that is being collected. And in this way, we are one of the only startups that is working in this. And for the level of authenticity that we can provide, it's really a huge benefit to the overall traceability that we can see.
Thank you. I can see there's something else in the Q&A box. So not a question, just a summary. So I'll read it out. Maybe Simon, you will have anything to add. So I understood that transparency during satellite missions of providing data might be a good idea to bring space and the impact closer to people. As SpaceX does it, it is kind of an event to see launches. I understood that if satellite missions are communicated better to people and customers and are more accessible through visualization, data, and video, it will be a good way to bring them closer to customers and the public. So yeah, just one of our participants sharing thoughts, and
yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point. If you think about the way that the public is reacting, we're entering like a second space race since the last few years. You can see that with the number of missions going to the moon. So within the next 3 years, you'll have Chinese astronauts going to the moon. Russia wants to go back to the moon. USA is going back as well. So the second space race is underway. And before the end of this decade, you will see maybe football matches on the moon. I don't know. But so that's the point. The point is that the public imagination is being captured by this. And this is also helping space as a business get more prominence. So a lot of companies, startup companies, when they try and get VC, they're going to investors, and investment companies are typically not really wanting to take a risk, or not really interested, or not even thinking about space. So this is a good point, that using space data, which is cheap, sometimes free. Yeah, if you're talking about observation images, they're available from Copernicus. It's all free now. And those kind of free data is creating a whole new set of businesses, and with increased public awareness of space, hopefully some of those barriers to investment will come down. That's what I'd like to see in the next few years, is more investors taking risks on the space business. It's longer term. Okay, you're not going to get a return in 2 or 3 years, but you're going to get a nice business that will run for many decades. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, so maybe I will just, before, if we wait for any other questions, if anyone has them, then yeah, we have one. Oh no, just saying thanks. So thank you for the comment, Simon. Yeah, but basically what I would like to add is just a reminder that our applications are open until the 15th of June for you to participate in our program. So we support both downstream and upstream solutions and provide 3 different levels of support. So feel free to ask us any questions via email. You can contact us via the website as well if you want to discuss what opportunities are there in the program. But other than that, I would like to thank you all for joining today's webinar. A special thank you to Christopher joining us today and introducing Xylene, and thank you, Simon.